The purpose of the Spring Statement is to set out our present economic and fiscal situation and to generate discussion about our nation's economic priorities over the medium term, not only from the members of this House, but indeed from the broader Irish community. As the Minister for Finance has outlined, we're looking forward to having between 1.2 and 1.5 billion euros of fiscal space for Budget 2016. We will allocate these resources, as he said, on an equal basis between additional spending and reducing the tax burden on low and middle income earners. Additional investment may also be possible arising from reduced spending on unemployment payments as the numbers at work continue to grow. Today, Ceann Comhairle, is about recognising the point we have now reached in our recovery and then setting out the context for Budget 2016. Today is not an alternative to that budget. It is a point-in-time assessment of where we stand right now and the challenges we face. I want to outline some of the challenges facing public expenditure as our economy recovers. I'll also set out some of the priorities on which we will need to focus over the coming years. I'm confident that we can build on the progress achieved if we continue, as we've done for the last 4 years, to make the right decisions. Having come through the worst economic shock in our history as a state, our primary focus must be and will be on sustainability. The Minister for Finance and I share one overriding priority. That is to ensure that what we endured as a nation over the last 7 years never happens again. We will not throw away the hard-won progress the people of Ireland have made. As a result of the decisions we've taken, the state's finances are now in a demonstrably better position. The imperative now is to ensure that we continue to act responsibly. Last year, gross voted expenditure amounted to some €54 billion. This is a reduction of about €9 billion from the 2009 peak. During that period, current spending was reduced by nearly 10% and capital spending by half, albeit from historical highs. These reductions were made at a time of increased demands and increased pressures on our public services. This included significantly increased numbers of people needing unemployment payments, more medical card holders, and additional students in our educational sector. Unlike the private sector, which in a recession sees a fall in demand, the demands on the public services actually increase during a recession. In addition, as a nation, we're facing, thankfully, demographic changes that present challenges for our health and our pension system. A prudent plan for the public finances must prepare for these changes. The economic crash has taught us that nobody owes Ireland a living. We received emergency funding at a time when the markets stopped lending to us. We owe it to ourselves to ensure that we do not allow a return to that position again. That's why we have sought to broaden the tax base to prevent an overdependence on property and taxation and transaction taxes, which contributed to the crisis in the state's finances. On the spending side, we are now planning our expenditure on a multi-annual basis, rather than simply from year to year. We've implemented a programme of reforms to improve the state's budgetary architecture. In fact, today's economic statement forms the newest part of the reformed budgetary process. Additional reforms include the introduction of multi-annual expenditure ceilings, a regular comprehensive review of public expenditure, the publication of the updated Public Spending Code, the implementation of performance budgeting, and the establishment of the Irish Government Economic and Evaluation Service, all of which we've done in recent years. We brought a greater level of transparency and efficiency to the allocation and spending of public money. None of these reforms is in and of itself a game changer. And while they are yet to be embedded in the public mind, they do, I believe, present a fundamental improvement in the way we do the public business. It became fashionable, Ceann Comhairle, for a while to decry this country and its potential. But the turnaround that we have achieved in our economy is indicative of the fundamental strengths of the Irish people and the Irish nation. We are now the fastest growing economy in Europe. Our recovery from this crisis has been as remarkable as our original descent into it. Ireland is a small, open, flexible economy with the ability to react fast to changing markets. Our population is comparatively young by European standards. We've developed an ability to attract investment that is the envy of the rest of the world. The days when we could plan our economy in isolation are long gone. We are reactors to, not drivers of, global economic demand. We are dependent on the international marketplace to sell our goods and services, and we are exposed to external developments. We've learned just how vulnerable we can be to a global downturn, exacerbated by domestic policy mistakes. Our purpose into the future should be to mitigate these threats where we can, to build into our economy resilience, and to focus on how we can continue to grow our economy. Success in these efforts will allow us to build the society that reflects Irish values, one that is fair, caring and decent, one in which people are rewarded for work, and one where every region and every individual county shares equally in the progress. Most in this House know that a fair society cannot be built on the back of a weak economy. The challenges that come with economic recovery have a context. Increases in public expenditure must be affordable. That's why the European Union has adopted rules to support sustainability. Endorsed by the Irish people in a referendum in 2012, the new fiscal rules serve as a tool to help us to responsibly manage our recovery. The rules mean that any future growth in public expenditure will not exceed the level of potential economic growth unless we specifically levy additional taxes to fund it. For a country like Ireland, where the national debt, as the Minister of Finance has indicated, is high, this is a lesson we don't need to relearn. These rules are new and hopefully will evolve over time and be refined, but there is no denying the fundamental truth at their heart. Public expenditure must be sustainable. We must plan carefully, using evidence-based decision-making to ensure that we invest the people's money in ways that will be of maximum benefit to the people of Ireland, not just for the next year or two, but over the medium and in the longer term. As I've already indicated, reductions in spending have made a significant contribution to the overall fiscal consolidation. However, our approach was never to simply apply blanket reductions to all areas of spending. In the context of a poorly performing economy and a weak labour market, we recognised that we need to support economic growth and protect our society's most vulnerable people to the greatest extent possible. Budget 2015 marked a very welcome point in our journey of recovery. It was the first time since 2009 that reductions in expenditure were not required to meet our set fiscal targets. Now, as outlined in today's fiscal forecasts and in the documentation before every member of the House, we prepare for Budget 2016 and look forward to increased gross voted current expenditure by an additional 600 to 750 million euros. This increase will allow government to deal with underlying demographic pressures in key areas such as social protection, education and health. It will allow us to target enhancements in key public services. Including these additional allocations, general government expenditure, excluding debt interest, is forecast now at just 32% of GDP or 37.5% of GNP. As a proportion of the overall economy, government spending is back now to roughly the size it was in 2001. Post-2016, the no policy change position outlined in the documentation before you is an annual increase of 300 million in current expenditure. Given the improvement in the fiscal position set out today, we expect there to be more space to accommodate additional spending. What we've done is simply after next year to put in demographic pressures. The extent of this space, as the Minister of Finance has indicated, will depend on continuing to pursue the correct policies. Ireland is changing. Over the last decade, our general population has increased by 500,000 people. We have the highest percentage of people under 15 in the European Union and the joint highest fertility rate. Life expectancy has also risen, and now almost 13% of our population are 65 years old. These changes are positive and welcome. They're the envy of many countries, but they also present service and resource challenges for our health, pensions and education systems. Our current projections, the ratio of working people to those over 65 is expected to steadily fall from the 5.5 to 1 that it is today to just over 2 to 1 by 2060. By 2021, the number of our citizens over the age of 65 will have increased by close to 40% from a decade earlier. This represents an extra 200,000 people. Overall, the proportion of our population is projected to increase from 11% in 2010 to 15% in 2020 and to 24% of our population over 65 by 2060. In the health area, demographic changes alone will cost an estimated €200 million a year in the coming years. This is partly why our focus has been on extending the reach of primary care and taking pressure away from our acute hospital system. We may be a younger country than many of our European partners, but we too are facing pressure on pensions. We currently spend €6.5 million annually on pension provision. Over 400,000 people are in receipt of one of the two main state pension schemes, the contributory and non-contributory state pensions. The cost of paying for these two schemes alone is projected to increase by €200 million per year out to 2026. Let me be clear, Ceann Comhairle. There is no threat to the pension. This government is committed to pension provision and to sustaining the value of the pension. It is because of this commitment that in our discussions on spending, it's important to be clear about future trends. Not enough of our citizens are planning for the future to supplement state pension entitlements. It is in this context that the Taoiseach has set up a working group to examine the pensions issue. In education, the number of school children is thankfully set to increase every year over the next 6 years. By 2021, we will need an additional 3,500 teachers in primary and secondary level to provide education to an additional 50,000 pupils. The number of third level students is also projected to increase by 20,000 over the same period. These are welcome and positive developments, but we must plan for them. Our economic future is bright as our highly educated workforce expands, but we need to plan to ensure our public finances meet those real challenges. Of course, we need to generate resources by growing our economy before we can spend money. On its own, the state cannot create wealth. Instead, it must do all it can to create the right conditions for prosperity through progressive taxation, appropriate regulation and targeted investment. Later, Ceann Comhairle, I'll speak on a number of the key issues for which investment is required: employment, education, infrastructure, public services. But before I do that, I should state that an economy is not a society. A functioning society is a fair one, where the fruits of economic growth are shared among all the people. We are committed to continuing to provide necessary welfare and other supports to all that need them. And that's why, throughout this crisis, we maintained core social welfare rates. It is also why, in the last budget, we increased child benefit rates and the living alone allowance, as well as increased spending to address homelessness. It's worth pointing out that Ireland has one of the most progressive tax and welfare systems in the OECD. In fact, in the most recent figures that I looked at, only Israel, of all the OECD countries, has a more progressive income tax system. Continued investment and growth in our economy will give us the resources to assist those who need them most. This goes to the heart of our economic model. If we don't create the wealth, we can't redistribute it. We take a view that reducing unemployment remains the best route to recovery. It increases the tax base and allows investment in public services. By continuing to get people back to work, we make our recovery sustainable. Irish people want to work. This has been a central focus of our government's efforts. We're now starting to reap the benefits. Employment has increased in every quarter for over 2 years, and that trend we expect to continue. Almost 100,000 new jobs have been created since the low point of mid-2012. We are achieving success through a range of measures, including the Action Plan for Jobs and investment in key capital projects such as social housing. Tackling long-term unemployment will remain our key focus. Our Pathways to Work programme supports almost 260,000 places, with 85,000 of those reserved specifically for the long-term unemployed. In Budget 2015, we doubled the number of positions on the Jobs Plus scheme to 6,000, encourage employers to hire the long-term unemployed specifically. Not only is the headline unemployment rate important, we must also increase employment throughout the country for all groups in our society, in every county and in every region. With that in mind, we introduced the Back to Work family dividend in the last budget. A related issue is childcare. A successful childcare policy helps people who wish to participate in the economy. The Minister for Children has established a working group on this issue, and the government will look forward to reviewing its outcome shortly. Obviously, we need to find a balance between the needs of children, parents, and the wider economy. Our investment in research and development is also bearing fruit, with an increase in the number of Enterprise Ireland-assisted companies involved in this area, and an increase in the number of patents from the commercialisation of publicly funded research. All of these initiatives are aimed at providing real opportunities for those in need of work and allowing those who are forced out of Ireland in recent years to come home. This government has overseen improved outcomes in education, more students at higher level, more students taking higher level maths. There's increased literacy rates among our 15-year-olds and increased numbers of PhD awards by Irish universities. This reflects the belief that the quality of our education system is a key determinant of future living standards. In the last budget, we announced 1,700 additional new full-time education posts. In the lifetime of this government, over 150 new schools will have been built. It's extraordinary that we built more schools in the worst recession in our history than they did in the boom years. At undergraduate and postgraduate level, we're providing higher education programmes and services for over 164,000 full-time students. We're providing 270,000 places on further education and training programmes. And we will continue to invest in education. We must embrace the skills revolution, adopting strategies to ensure continuous upskilling and development of our workforce to allow our citizens to be at the forefront of new technology and the creation of high-value jobs. The potential of the Irish people is enormous. Our aim is to help the Irish people realise that potential. Thanks to our economic recovery, we are now in a position to increase investment in our people and in our infrastructure. We will do this, Ceann Comhairle, in a strategic way. We will ensure maximum value for money with a focus on future needs. The capital review undertaken by my department will inform a new capital plan which I intend to publish in June. This plan will take our funding horizon on the capital side out to 2020 and identify priority areas for investment. Infrastructural constraints can act as a brake on growth, reducing the productive potential of our economy. We also need a proactive approach to dealing with climate change and its future impact. Investment is needed in parts of our school system, in parts of our road network, public transport, social housing, broadband and flood alleviation. Spending in these areas will increase our capacity for growth, our ability to respond to social needs and balance our environment. As I already indicated, capital expenditure has fallen considerably since peak. That was the correct thing to do at the time. We simply hadn't got the money. There is no point in investing to extend one house if one can't afford the grocery bill. But it's now time to invest again and to meet our infrastructural needs, and this will be reflected in the capital plan, particularly in the years beyond 2018. We now have a considerably smaller, less expensive and more productive public service. Having served in government for the last 4 years during this crisis, I am proud of how the public service has responded to the additional workload and the productivity demanded of them. These changes and reductions in pay have allowed us to minimise the effects of the crisis in essential areas such as health, education and social protection. Indeed, public service reform has allowed us to provide additional resources, as I've indicated, to frontline services, a process that I, Ceann Comhairle, have called the reform dividend. We have added over 1,000 nurses since 2014. We recruited 300 Gardaí last year, and we'll take in 250 more this year. We are hiring 920 additional mainstream teachers, 480 resource teachers, and 365 special needs assistants this year. As well as being more efficient and productive, the new public service must be more responsive to the needs of service users and more strategic, focused on longer-term outcomes. This will involve, Matty, harnessing the potential of digitalisation and data. It will also involve the use of alternative models of service delivery to better meet the needs of users. I'll explain that later to you. Earlier today, Ceann Comhairle, the government agreed to my proposal to enter into discussions with the trade unions on the issue of public service pay. The pay reductions are governed by financial emergency legislation that require me annually to review the status of that emergency. As the economy continues to improve, the prospect of legal challenges to the financial emergency increases. It is prudent, therefore, to plan for the orderly unwinding of these emergency provisions. Not to do so would be foolhardy. I don't intend to obviously discuss the negotiations on the floor today, but let me say this, Ceann Comhairle. All public servants have had their pay reduced significantly. Over the last 2 years, we've seen the beginnings of pay awards in the private sector. And as the economy recovers, we need to ensure that remuneration and the cost of the public service generally are managed to ensure that they remain sustainable. Of course, without the productivity gains made in recent years, we would not be in a position now to discuss the unwinding of FEMPI. Given their value to the state, the unwinding of these measures will take time. To do anything else would be to jeopardise the public finances again, something as a government we will not do. In order to meet the challenges that we face, it's essential that we engage with people. This spring economic statement represents the beginning of that process. Every government has a duty to engage with its citizens. The government also has a responsibility to ensure that policy making is consistent with broader societal and economic objectives. A national economic dialogue between government and relevant civil society groups will discuss the most effective and equitable way to achieve our objectives. These groups will have obligations too, and that goes not only for groups who want more expenditure in every area that we can think of, but also of the parties opposite. We cannot meet all the demands of each and every person or group. To try to do so would bankrupt the state. Proposals for increased expenditure should be matched by genuine attempts to find matching fundings commensurate with the proposed expenditure. No party can ignore the general parameters under which public policy has to be made. Our engagement with all groups as a government will be firmly rooted in these parameters. While these discussions will inform the process, it is the government of the day that will make the decisions. It will do so on the basis of what is the long-term best interest of our people. In concluding, Ceann Comhairle, I want to repeat that we must not allow this country to return to the devastating cycle of boom and bust that has been the hallmark of previous administrations. We must learn the lessons of the past decade and not repeat the mistakes that brought us as a country and as a society to the edge of ruin. Our vision and plans for renewed prosperity will not be built on the sand of short-term or unsustainable increases in government spending. It will be built on the rock of fiscal responsibility and investment in the productive capacity of our people. Since 2011, we've provided stable and responsible government. We've stood up for the Irish people and charted a path to recovery. We cannot and will not throw money at problems. Expenditure growth must continue to be linked to performance and to reform. Any increases in expenditure and incomes must be in line with growth and productivity. Decision-making must be evidence-based, with a strategic focus on improved outcomes for our citizens. We've come a long way, Ceann Comhairle, since the depths of our economic crisis and the fiscal crisis, a crisis that was supported and cheer-led by some of the more vocal people opposite. The clear evidence presented here today proves that fact. Our task now is to map the next phase of our nation's journey. This will be a country that creates good jobs with secure incomes, a country that provides well-run public services, that listens and responds to people's needs, that builds real communities and provides real opportunities for all our people.